Okay. So I'm so grateful to see all of you here. Um, I don't know, about a year or so ago when I saw this book show up, I got very excited about it. Um, I have done sort of been on the margins of racial justice work in the United States, and certainly, um, have been aware of what's been unfolding here over the last couple of years and around the world, um, and aware about the ways in which the racial justice community talks about that work, and aware about the way systemic constellations kind of talks about the intersections of race and community, and hadn't been able to find a language that brought those two together very well. In the systemic constellations community, we talk about ancestry, right? I've been in the my people have been in the United States from the very beginnings of European exploration and colonization here. Uh, well, that's not true. I just excluded the Spanish. I apologize. English exploration of these lands. And from the constellations point of view, I have German ancestors, I have English ancestors, I have French ancestors, yeah? In the constellation space, we don't tend to talk so much about white ancestors. Understandably, we're talking about these threads of belonging, yeah, over time and place. And yet I was also aware from the other context that wrestling with the inheritances of whiteness was something I really was called to. And I couldn't find the bridge. And so when I saw this book, Whiteness is Not an Ancestor, from someone I know is working in that space, it was very powerful for me. And so I wanted to give an opportunity for us to connect with this a little bit more as a community. Before, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa pretty soon. But before I do that, I just want to honor that we're in the system of our history. Yeah? And this history is intense. And so usually when we start to have conversations like this, there's some powerful energies present, and that's appropriate. It's as it should be, yeah? And it's worth just noticing before we dive in that that is the case, yeah? Like we could have some responses or some experiences that surprise us. And so I just invite us in this group, and again, I expect a few more people, if we can come together in mutual support and kindness to explore this in whatever way it arises here. We have a bit of a plan, but it's also going to be a bit organic and spontaneous. So I do like to start out with just a quick round of introductions. Nothing too deep right now, but if you could share who you are, just your name, where you're calling from, and if you like doing a land acknowledgement, by all means, feel free to include that. Don't feel required. And in a sentence, perhaps, not too long, just very briefly, a sentence or two, what brought you here today? Okay, just so we can have a sense of who's here. So your name and where you're calling from and what brought you here today. I've already said my name and what brought me here today. I am calling from outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, the traditional lands of the ancestral pueblos. So invite you to just unmute, popcorn style, no order. Go ahead and just share your name, where you're calling from, and a sentence about what brought you here today.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Cahill, and I'm calling from Montclair, New Jersey. I've been involved in constellations for, oh gosh, a bunch of years. And I just saw the title and the description of this, and it struck me as being really important to experience. So that's what brought me.
Carolyn? I'm going to honor that Karen has said she's going to pass introing herself. She's sick with COVID. So we send you good healing energies, Karen, and thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Kerry Kay. I'm originally from Australia. I've been living in the US for a number of decades. I'm in central New Jersey by Princeton. So we're kind of neighbors, Carolyn. I live on the lands of the Lenape people, and I don't know if you want to know where my ancestors are from, but prior to Australia, they were from England, Ireland, and Wales. And I've been associated with the constellations work one way or another for close to 20 years, I guess, probably 17, 18 years. And I met you, Leslie, in San Francisco at a constellations conference there some time ago. Lisa, I met you at that same conference. I was so impressed by your work, both of you. So I'm here today. Very curious about your book, Lisa. I married and very, what do I say? I don't know, the whiteness thing. Having been part of a biracial family in a biracial relationship currently, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Carrie.
I'm Catherine Curran, and I'm here in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. I'm going to say I don't anymore like doing land acknowledgements because it doesn't seem like it's enough. Either I should contribute, which I have. I'd rather do that. So I'm not sure why I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying this to all of us who do this a lot. So anyway, I am here. What's the briefest way? I'm pretty involved in this work these days, but like you, Leslie, it's kind of in pieces. Some is constellation, some is not. Got way more involved after George Floyd's murder here in Minneapolis. I'm just trying to piece together the oppression in my own ancestral history, which is largely Irish, and how that affected me in my whiteness, and the increasing understandings I get from just at a training at a place called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, who's done 40 years of racial training, and heard their explanation of white supremacy, which I really like. So there's a lot more I could say, but that's certainly enough right now. Hi. Hi, Lisa. And Leslie, and I really want to be here for the whole thing. When I take your stuff, Leslie, I come and then I go. But there's just a lot. There's a family health crisis and other stuff going on. So I will stay as long as something inside me says I can stay before I have to go do other things.
Thank you,
But this
Catherine.
is my work right now. This is what I'm doing more as volunteer, more than constellations at the moment. Is working with this in this area, racial justice.
Thank you, Catherine. Just Chantel has written, good morning, this is Chantel coming here today from Snoqualmie land. Been researching my ancestors lately and interested how whiteness can be deconstructed and lead to greater healing for the planet and all people, human and otherwise. Thank you, Chantel.
Well, I'll introduce myself because my cousin here from Snoqualmie comes from similar lands. And my name is Anne, and I'm currently living on lands that were stolen from the Snohomish people, currently known as Whidbey Island. But I like doing a land acknowledgement because the land that I grew up on is one of my ancestors. And I grew up on land that was Ute land and Cheyenne and Arapaho land, and currently known as Colorado. And a lot of story there. And I know Lisa from years of doing constellation work with her here locally. just have deeply appreciated the healing and movement that has come from that in me and in my family line. And I'm one of the authors in her book. My essay is called, I always have to read it because it goes underground. I forget what the title of it's In the Shadow of Mount Evans, Living in a Legacy of Genocide, White Privilege, and Intergenerational Healing. So thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you for your essay, Anne. That was really powerful reading. Thank you.
It's morning with you, but it's evening here in London. So I'm Una, speaking to you just north of London. This is my husband, Dan. I've known Lisa for, well, many years now, but I am also one of the contributing writers in the book, and my piece is called The Cuckoo That Laid the Golden Egg, The Legacy of Nazi Gold in Switzerland. And I've been involved in constellations since 2001.
And I'm Dan, and I came here today on Una's invitation, and met Lisa last summer in Oak Park, Illinois. I'm from Chicago, so I feel like I share in the systemic community as well as Una and Lisa's friendship. Being here in England, I get a lot of place questions as soon as I open my mouth. And so I always say I'm from Chicago. And for me, that involves a certain kind of vacancy of place, because I grew up outside of Chicago. And if you know the history of Chicago, Martin Luther King said it's the most segregated, racially divided city that he had encountered in America. And that's the city that I grew up in. And systemically, my besides growing up in Chicago, is my grandfather was a Chicago police sergeant, and I know from the history of his service in the police force what it's like on the interface when you're growing up in a culture where there's racial division that seems like it's uncrossable. And so there's a place in my heart that wants to carry this further. And I'm just glad I was able to be here today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And can you just say your first name again, because Una's name is the only one that's on the screen?
Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll speak. It's Sharon Halfnight. I'm one of the contributors to this book. My piece is called White Walking. I'm speaking to you from the Coast Salish lands, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam peoples. And I like to acknowledge that because it creates a connection to the ancestral links of this land. And it also honors all those who've stewarded this land. And yes, there's always more to do, but I believe starting by speaking from the land that you're on is a good start for me. And my birth roots come from the Six Nations territory near the Great Lakes. So the Grand River, actually it was the Swift River at Guelph, where I was born. And I am an immigrant to the coastal area here, to these Coast Salish lands, where I felt at home in a deep, deep way. I have ancestry that's English and Irish and Scottish. The English part of it comes from the Great Yarmouth area, and also from the Lake District. both of which are coastal and near the sea, which I think is why I love Vancouver so much. And then the other strong threads of those who've been in Canada much longer, yes, and I should say it's Vancouver, Canada, that those Coast Salish lands I'm part of are where the troubles come from in Ireland. All that around, well, I don't really need to say any more about that, but it's definitely part of my heritage and part of how we ended up in Canada. I've known Lisa since 2009 and hosted her in Vancouver with a large amount of wonderful community growing from that. And Leslie, I remember you, I think it was the conference in Seattle that you came up to. And so you hosting this is, and along with Lisa, is why I'm here, as well as the book. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. One of the things that, I mean, I know coming into this, but I was just relearning with Lisa as we were sort of preparing for this, is that this particular, all traumas, and in this particular trauma, lives and is experienced through our bodies. So I just invite you to be present to your body as we share these stories with a lot of respect for whatever messages our bodies might start to give us. And the capacity for co-regulation that comes from when we do this together. Yeah, so thank you for all those shares and all the ways in which you spun off a little bit. So that's great. This is all part of what we want to investigate today. So Lisa's a colleague of mine. I can't say up until recently. I mean, Lisa and I have known of each other. We have had a few conversations here and there, bumped into each other in the constellations world, but really isn't until this book that I really went, I need to support what Lisa's up to here. And so I reached out to her and asked if she would be interested in this. And now we're starting to get to know each other better, which is great. Lisa's been a psychotherapist for 30 years. She first got introduced to constellations work in 1988, which is
98.
98, thank you. And she lives in Bellingham, Washington, which is real close to a lot of you. And I'm going to turn this over to her. She is going to share a little bit about her journey and how this book came to be. And then invite us into more reflection or experience of our own relationship with these great themes. Lisa.
Thank you, Leslie. I really want to honor you, Leslie, because we would not be gathered here today without you contacting me and convening us and doing all that you've done to bring us together. So I'm just very grateful for all that you have done to gather us. And you know, wherever two or more are gathered, is how I feel that this is a holy conversation. So I said to Leslie that it made sense to me to say a bit about my own personal history path in the constellation field on the way here, because that's the context for how this book emerged. And those of you, Una and Anne, and I think Karen went off to take good care with COVID, and Sharon, I don't want you to feel pressure to say anything, but I also want you to feel very much more than welcome to contribute, because this book was this co-created project. So I just wanted to say that from the outset as we go along. So when I was introduced to the constellation work in 1998, it began a path for me, as it does for many people, as it does for most people who are introduced to this work. And I feel very, very fortunate, very grateful that my fate included being able to work with Hellinger. And many of that kind of first generation of his students, and that the teachers who studied and learned with him. And so those early years of Hellinger's offering this work included so much attunement to the post-Holocaust experience as a German. So all those constellations that, you know, Una and Dan, because I know you came into the field at the same time, I really want to welcome you to contribute anything you want to say along here. You know, those early years for me working with all those facilitators, so much of it was about the war. And this, you know, complex field of conscience, group conscience, and its relationship with and differentiation from personal conscience. All these principles that have to do with guilt and innocence and membership in the group, how relative it is. Feeling of guilt and innocence as a barometer, as a guide around this feeling of membership in the group. So, so from the beginning for me, I always felt that the intersection of being a person, an individual person, and family, the field of family, and the influence of country. It was never named citizenship in my experience in those constellation workshops, but that is in hindsight what it was. It was, you know, we have citizenship in a country. But that intersection, which of course the Holocaust as an example, that collective trauma is trauma. But this intersection of it all, for me, I felt them always to be woven together. So as an American, from the beginning, I just always felt the intersection of it all. That the constellation method offers this. It's what it offered me. It offered an acute, embodied, immediate introduction / reminder of how complex this field of intersection is and how much it's held in the body. So, so it woke up in me my experience as an American, my home country. And And, you know, when I was first introduced to the constellation work, at that point, I'd been a psychotherapist already for 7 years. So my full-time practice was working with individuals. And the constellation work helped me make sense of the feeling I had in my body all the time as a therapist, which was that when people came into my office, they were missing full landscapes of generational systems and grandmothers and tribes. And I mean, the constellation work was such a relief to me to help me make sense of that feeling. So, you know, I just immersed myself in that work. I would say BC, before children, before my husband and I had our daughter. So I had a lot, I had time and I had more money to be able to like travel around and host German teachers, etc. And my friend Kay, also a therapist, she and I just traveled around. We held hands and we learned together, and we had our own little private study group learning the work. And so as an American, again, it was just clear that, oh, just like the US, my home country, really is founded on disconnection from family by choice and by force. That's the shorthand version, because I don't want to talk this whole time. I want to be judicious. I want to be as, you know, concise with my words as possible, but I do want to do my best to convey a sense of how, again, wherever we go, for me, this was my feeling, wherever we go, our families are with us. Our countries are like, all these histories, they're right there. And so the path for me of being called to do so, but being able to do so, work as a facilitator, as a guide, as a teacher. I don't really like the word trainer, because I think to myself, training for what? You know, I think we train for marathons, but the word training doesn't fit for me. So, but as a guide, somehow in this work with people, I just think that intersection just is always there. And my daily practices that just emerged organically, my daily prayer and meditation practice of beginning my day in prayer and meditation with my own family, with my own ancestors, praying to them, honoring them, prioritizing my own family, who are, you know, as a daughter, as a sister, as a wife, as a mother, as an aunt, as a niece, all those family roles, all these things, the capacity for seeing whiteness just emerged. It just emerged organically by stewarding my own sense of humanity that comes from family. And so, you know, in 2009, I wrote this book. I tried really hard not to write that book, but I had to write that book. The first book was Ancestral Blueprints, about the history of the US, because this thing about citizenship and country, you know, I couldn't not see it. I couldn't not see the history of the US. Just as the constellation work was introduced to me, the history of Germany was woven into the workshop. So it's like, so so um so my attunement, also my alertness, my my own capacity for being able to see and acknowledge how the work of the constellation work develops on the soil that is my home country of the US, you know, as Don van Kampenhout would say, you know, has said that the constellation work, you know, it develops on the land, wherever it is across the world, with whatever history has happened before it. Well, in the US, that is, you know, it's a 400 plus year history of these complex fields of trauma, of colonialism, of slavery, of immigration, that again all have to do with separation from family. So I see the ways in which, you know, the way that the work develops is, of course, influenced by those histories. But the whiteness piece, you know, it was in working in Atlanta for many years that phrase "whiteness is not an ancestor" just emerged from the ancestral realms. I didn't make it up. It emerged from the ancestral realms while facilitating, and I could see it had a healing effect. It had a good effect on people, that phrase. So 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 fast forward to the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, the year-long immersion groups that I was used to lead before COVID. One of the women in one of my programs, Sonia Lee, invited me to do a workshop in Banff, where she lives, and so I offered a workshop. We offered a workshop there called "Whiteness is Not an Ancestor," and integrated the work that I'd been doing for many years in these fields of history. And during that weekend, I had a dream at night. There was a nighttime dream that was very clear. That was like getting an email from your ancestors, kind of a thing. So they sent me an email that weekend that was this writing project, which was a very clear outline of, here are the women to invite, and here's the thing to do, and here's the timeline for it. And so I had to think about, I really had to reflect, because I knew it would be a big thing to do it. And I by the following spring of 2020, March 2020, I said yes. I said yes to them. And I said yes to the next generations. I just said yes. So I I invited the group of women, all of whom I had spent time with in the constellation field in one way or another, working with these histories. And so I knew they had a capacity. I knew they had a capacity to write, to talk about their selves and whiteness in the context of family and ancestry, and knowing that acknowledging what is has an effect. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't trying to change anything. I trust the field. I trust the flow that when we acknowledge what is, these are like foundational things. I hope all I'm saying doesn't sound radical, because it's all like, these are principles from the constellation work. The constellation work, it's about not acknowledging what is. It's like, so all these principles were what I felt clear about, still feel clear about, and supported by in doing this project. And so, and I had a clear structure for the writing of the book, of flow of group meetings, by Zoom and a timeline for it all, I realized that at this point, it's still hard to talk about it, I think, because of what a unique experience it was. I think that I said this to Leslie before we began, that this thing about whiteness, it was created in groups, and this is in the book, we put it in the book, but whiteness was created in groups. It will take groups to deconstruct it. It will take groups to deauthorize it. So, and again, I just want to reiterate that my ability to see whiteness being in relationship with being a white person just organically emerged. So there seems to be, it's clear to me, I mean, obviously, we all know this, there's a lot of confusion about that, collectively, understandably, because whiteness, by design, erases humanity. That's the point of it. It's built in. But typically, white people have the hardest time seeing it. It's complex. It's a complex thing. But I don't want to get trapped in the head, which is typically what happens with this topic, and not what I set out to steward with the 12 women who said yes to writing. So I think I'll stop now because I'm really aware that I've been talking a lot. And Leslie, I'm going to invite you to ask me something, or I want to see if any of the contributors, and I want to welcome Pam Emerson has joined us. She's another contributor to the collection. Welcome, Pam, and I want to welcome John, our colleague, also. So glad that they're both here with us. But do you want to ask me something, or I want to toss it back to you, Leslie?
That's what I was going to do. I was just going to welcome some folks who showed up while you were talking. So Pam and John, we honor that perhaps you need to have your videos off. Understand that, and we are glad you're here. Lisa, I did want to follow up with a couple of things. Pam or John, you want to just say hello and where you're calling in from? Just we did that all a little, at the beginning.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pam calling in from Duwamish land, Seattle, Washington.
And one of our authors, yes? Yeah.
And I'm John. I'm in Seattle, Washington also.
Great. Thank you. Good to see you both. When we were getting ready for this, there are two other things I wanted to invite you into, Lisa, before we open it up a little bit more. One is that you said something interesting about the candle behind you. And I wanted to invite you to just say a word about that. And then after that, I was wondering if you had a little bit of an experience you might like us to rest into. Now, your story is amazing. It's beautiful. It helps me think differently about mine. Anything that you would like to shift us into reflection or experience of our own stories. So the candle and that, if you welcome that.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you. It just feels so right for it all to be. It is all together. Everything is so connected. So this candle, it's Kuan Yin in 360 degrees. So this is a reminder of mercy. And it's a reminder for me, but a reminder for all of us. I mean, all of us gathered, but all of us across the globe. And perhaps this is a lovely just right way to be introduced to a little bit of reflection, meditation that you're also cueing me to, Leslie. So I just want to invite each of us to take a moment. You can have your eyes open or closed, but take a few moments to breathe in a good, nourishing, cleansing, centering way. I'm going to do the same thing because, as Leslie said at the outset, it is a big topic. And these histories are in the body. So I certainly feel it in mine. Take a moment to breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth. It's a good thing to maybe notice that the surface you're sitting on, let it be a reminder of your embodied being a bit more, that you're supported. There's nothing you have to do to work hard to receive the support that's here for you. Let the surface you're sitting on remind you that the invitation is to receive this contact just as you are, just as you have it. And that everyone else is doing the same in their own way. That's theirs to have. So the same is true for all that we're speaking of, all that brings us here together today, whether it's those of us here live or those who listen to the recording later. All the forces that have brought us together for this topic are the same ones who are here to support us, that we can lean on, that we can say thank you to, that we can be reminded that whiteness is a made-up idea that's had a big effect. In the long span of human history, whiteness as an idea has been here for a blip of time. 500 or so years is a blip of time compared to tens and tens of thousands of years old that our species is. That perspective reminds us of how powerful we are, that an idea could have such a very big effect. So let yourself consider that whatever you're experiencing, whatever you're noticing in this moment, may also be in resonance with others who came before you. You're not the first one. What a relief. Let it be a relief. Let yourself honor your own self and others to who we are and who they are as individuals, while recognizing how very much we have in common. That we're all descendants. We are all grandchildren, granddaughters, grandsons. We all have grandparents and great-grandparents. We all have ancestors. We are all future ancestors. Some of us have kids, others don't. Some are in parenting roles, some are not. But we're all stewards of the web, and that makes us future ancestors. So let yourself take heart. Let yourself be heartened that we're together for a little time. To be reminded of our shared humanity and all that comes with it. Let this whole meditation and prayer have a good place in your heart, just as it is, just as you are. And I invite you to pick someone or something for whom or for which you're grateful. Be specific. And let the feeling and the vibration of gratitude spread easily, gently, and thoroughly to the cells of your being and the cells of your soul, so that this movement and this meditation and this prayer and our time together can unfold in a good way for each of us and all of our relations in a soil of gratitude. And when it feels complete, go ahead and open your eyes or reconnect here with others who are gathered.
Thank you for that constellation, Lisa.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If it feels okay with you, Lisa, here's what I'd like to invite us into next. So we have about a little less than 40 minutes left, 30 minutes left. And I certainly had some experiences come up from what you just led us through, and some others may have as well. Not so much more abstract ideas about this topic, but a new encounter with our families and our ancestries and our history, and perhaps specifically our ancestors and our experience of whiteness. And I'm inclined to just invite a few people to share. And if there's time for everybody to share, that would be awesome. But that means that those of us who go first will need to be a little brief and economical in what we share. But I think these are really powerful stories. Lisa, how does that land for you?
Just fine. Very good. Thank you. And I just also want to make sure that the especially that the this is really a rare opportunity for any of the contributors to say anything you'd like to say about the experience, anything, the experience of writing the book or anything else. It's quite an opportunity for the larger constellation field, I think, to hear from them, because yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned earlier, and the authors are under no obligation.
Exactly. Exactly.
We don't want to put you on the spot either. You came perhaps for yourself and to meet your own needs. So yeah, let's start there. We have Una and Anne and Sharon and Pam
Yes.
and Corinne, who probably is just hanging out. Karen, you know the correct pronunciation.
Karen.
Karen, thank you. Um, would any of you like just briefly, because it would be nice to be able to hear from as many voices as possible, but what's arising for you now that you would like to share with the group? Feel free to just, yeah, Una, you just unmute
Yeah.
and share.
I just want to pick up on something Lisa said about writing the book and the fact that you didn't want to change anything or teach anything or preach anything. And to me, that was both, it made it almost more difficult, certainly in the beginning, but it was very freeing as well, because it meant that I was only talking about my own experience, and then people, they couldn't criticize my own experience because it was mine. So I was an expert. Suddenly I didn't feel lacking in confidence. I felt that I was an expert because I was talking about my story, and it enabled me to go deeper and deeper into the story, into areas that I hadn't necessarily thought I would touch on or discuss, or that I would cherry pick, and I wouldn't touch those particular subjects because they were too difficult. So to me, that was enormously helpful, Lisa, that I didn't have to be a certain way or to present myself as an expert on these matters. I just spoke about myself. And I think that is perhaps, I don't know about the most helpful, but I think if other people can take that away and think, okay, I can look at difficult things in my family, that is my family, and so I can talk about them. I have the right and the expertise actually to talk about it.
Yes.
So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say while I remembered. So thank you.
Una, do I have your permission to share the title of your essay?
Sure.
So people just get a taste of what this personal expertise is that Una's talking about, which is The Cuckoo That Laid the Golden Egg, The Legacy of Nazi Gold in Switzerland. So I just have a whole feeling for Una's expertise and even just that title. Thank you. Other authors who wish to share a bit of experience. And again, not required.
I'll share. This is Sharon. The embodied experience and the connection that is possible through constellation has been a profound gift in my life. And then to grow it from a personal group focused on ourselves, which we did in Family Matters, and take it into this arena where we tackled a topic of Lisa's calling, brought something. I mean, when you speak of the business of citizenry being a hidden reality for all of us, in some ways it's there. It's a little like the whiteness, and it's an empowering side of it from my perspective. And you can't access the power if you can't acknowledge what is, and also connect yourself and take the responsibility on a different level than the individual one. It was beautiful what happened within our group, because we all were able to come as ourselves, and we were all able to share as we were able to. So there was just a huge gift on so many levels, and it grows from the connection for me that we gain from the constellation work if we're a dissociated white person. out dissociated any person, because right there, the trauma that we carry, if we acknowledge what is, we become whole in a new way. And then the sharing allows more to come in groups. So that's what I'd like to say. Thank you for offering the opportunity.
Thank you, Sharon.
Well, I can follow you on that, Sharon. The experience of being here this morning has just brought so much feeling up, and I just find myself weeping. So that's part of the embodiment of this work, is it takes us into our feelings, and it's so good. It's so good to let those tears flow. And Lisa, it's something I've known, of course, but you bring it again, whiteness was created in groups, and it needs to be dismantled in groups. And you spoke of that too, Sharon. And that's just been such a theme for me. I wrote about my great-great-grandfather's legacy that he left our family. He was a governor in Colorado when the Sand Creek Massacre occurred. And writing this essay broke something loose in my life, to be able to acknowledge that part of my history, to work through the shame of it, to work through that kind of white guilt that just ties one up in knots, and go public with it. You know, I can't tell you how many times people will say, "Oh, you wrote that essay." And then I have this whole visible ancestry that's visible there. And there's an acknowledgement that is one of the first steps of the healing, and then to step into action and to work in groups to dismantle whiteness wherever we find it. And it's just amazing to me. So many groups now I find myself part of who are involved in dismantling whiteness, and just one of them are the Cheyenne and Arapaho in Colorado, the descendants of the people that my great-great-grandfather was involved in massacring. And they want to change the name of that mountain that is in the title of my essay, In the Shadow of Mount Evans. And I am all for it. And it makes so much sense to let them choose a new name for it, give an old name to it, rewrite that landscape of ancestry that reminds them every time. And it's been complex and heartbreaking, and so often it's just difficult to be with it. It's difficult, and I go back to the constellation work that I've done, and I lean back into the arms of those ancestors. And all of them. I mean, there was just that one that gets all the notice, but there are so many other ancestors that are there with us. And so, Lisa, thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
I want to just welcome Amelia. Thank you for being here. We are in some sharing time here, and we're glad to have you here. We've been at it for an hour. I don't know, there might have been a time zone thing. If you want to just say hello and say where you're calling in from.
I'm so sorry for interrupting. There was a time zone thing. So I'll look forward to getting the recording later. So I'm Amelia Seeger. I'm a constellation facilitator, and I live in Portland, Oregon, and blessings to this work. And, you know, if you're mid-process, I have no problem. I can just excuse myself out.
You are totally welcome here, and to receive whatever is emerges in the next 30 minutes. No worries about that. Any other authors who would like to share a bit before we open it beyond the authors? And again, authors are not required to share.
I have something arising that I don't, I'm not sure the words will make sense. I'll just say them anyway. What came during the meditation, Lisa, was like a voice from my ancestors that like we didn't know what you know. We didn't see what you see. And that's it. That's what I heard. And I think it might connect a little bit to what Anne was just saying, that about the shame and guilt that can kind of gum up the work so much in the current, with the current keepers of the web. Yeah, that was something that arose for me in the writing of the essay, was like that was a bit of a, I don't want to call it a struggle, but a bit of a something to work through, was like feelings of judgment and like anger and distancing, wanting to distance myself from what they didn't see or what they didn't do, or how could they have that kind of language. So that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Any other authors who wish to speak before I open this up to the group a little wider? Lisa, I'd like to share that, I mean, obviously as someone who convened this and has been doing this work for a little while, I've thought on these topics for a bit, but there's always something new arising. Like, how have I not noticed that before? Kind of a moment. I often think what the first order of love is like. We're honoring something that's been right in front of our nose, but we still couldn't see it for all of the systemic and group conscience reasons that we can't see it. You know, the fish sees the water they're swimming in, sort of thing. And so in your little meditation, what came to my heart were my parents, who were severe alcoholics, and all of their siblings who in one way or the other were, you kind of wonder, like, what war did they go through that they had this much dysfunction and disorder in their lives without there being any war to point to, right? And it just sort of hit me in your little meditation. Wow, this whiteness has just landed on that generation so intensely. And I'm aware of, you know, the layers of settler and colonist history that precede this, and all of the attempts of good work too. I just private chatted Anne. I too had a governor of Colorado, great grandfather, a little later than Governor Evans, and he was actually kicked out of office for fighting the KKK. So different threads of what the inheritance of whiteness has meant, and trying to be good in that context and not being able to be good in that context, and all of the burdens that they carried. And of course, as their child, being the child of alcoholics and what that meant for me personally, right? So I just thank you for sort of taking the frame like this and making it like this, in a way that, you know, I know, but I didn't know.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
So I invite others and any other, what's landing in you as you reflect on these themes for yourself? Where's the rubber hitting the road for you?
So, I wanted to say, Lisa, thank you for all the work that you've let come through you, and all of this that you've let exist, you
Mhm.
know, and for so many years. And yeah, you know, first of all, I just want to say, like you said, Leslie, oh, I saw it differently. Just what you said about we are a nation of, I don't know how you said it, kind of sort of people without families. Do you
We're
know?
the country was founded on disconnection from family.
Yes, disconnection from family and founded. Well, my ancestors came from Ireland much later than that, after the Irish Great Hunger, but it's still so true, and that has formed so much of the work I've had to do, just in constellations, because there was so much incredible tragedy with that. And I didn't mean to say that I'm not doing constellations anymore, but there's just so much of my own personal healing I need to do around a lot of this right now that I've kind of taken a step back while I take a step forward in other ways. But the main thing I wanted to say is, when a couple of the other you guys who are authors were talking about why you do say the land acknowledgement. Um, First of all, we live on 2.5 acres of land, and it was Dakota land, and border, and also close to Anishinaabe land, and also there were Ho-Chunk people that lived here.
Mhm.
And I think I realized, as others were talking, why I didn't want to say it, or why. There's a couple reasons, but the main one today is because it's just so incredibly sad. I didn't want to
Mhm.
feel the sadness of it.
Mhm.
You know, I just didn't want to feel the sadness, the tragedy
Mhm.
of of that I get to see this beautiful land that we say we own.
Mhm.
This 2.5 acres out here where there's cranes nesting in our
Mhm.
wetlands, and I saw a great blue heron the other day, and so grateful for that, and and maybe that's why I don't want to feel it, because I don't know, I don't know, I'm going to say this, you know, what I can do to make it right. And it's enormous, so it's not just me. And
Mhm.
so um, I we did a constellation last fall with Jan Jakob Stam about what it would take to heal Minneapolis. And one of the representatives, Vanessa Fudge from Australia, represented the indigenous people and said that it goes back to the desecration of the people and the land.
Mhm.
So one of the things I have done is organize a sacred sites tour, um, that we'll be doing in June, to Badote, which is the sacred land of the
Mhm.
Dakota,
Mhm.
that then was turned into an internment camp in the winter of 1862 by Fort Snelling.
Yes.
And it
Mhm.
was part of that whole thing
Yes.
that resulted in the 38 men being hanged in Mankato,
Mhm.
which is the largest
Yep.
group assassination in the country
Yes.
here.
Yes. Mhm.
So it was working. So we're going to be doing that in June, and I am, I guess, letting myself feel what it's going to be,
Mhm.
to really to
Yes.
feel that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll be right there with you, Catherine. My family roots are just 70
I know
miles south of there,
where
of Mankato,
of Mankato.
where that hanging took place. It was the largest public lynching.
Yes.
This is the same year of the Homestead Act.
Yeah, 1862.
in the US that welcome, you know, like all these histories go together. And so, you know, it's very humbling to me to be reminded daily how much whiteness trains the mind to think that action of a particular kind is the thing that we ought to be doing to feel
I don't know
power.
what you mean. I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, the act of being present to what is and to have the full-bodied, full-hearted experience of being present is good medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's necessary medicine for, you know, dispelling whiteness. And but it's contrary to what our Western trained mind is taught. So thank you. Yeah. It's this powerful action, as far as I'm concerned. Being present, all of us together,
And you know,
just as we are, you know, is powerful. Yeah.
by the way, I wanted to say thank you. I'm not leading it. I'm organizing it. It's being led by a member of the Mohawk Nation and a member of the Dakota Nation. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine, please feel the group's blessing for you and all of you as you gather.
Well, thank you.
Again, as Lisa said, we can only do this as a group.
Right.
And some of it is local and some of it is dispersed. If it was up to just me to heal all of this, I'd explode, right?
No, you're absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm mindful of John and Carrie and Chantel, Amelia and Karen, if there's anything any of you wanted to offer. No obligation, but just
And I just honor that Carolyn said goodbye to us.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry I jumped on a little late.
Okay.
So I kind of missed the meat of the matter. I mean, I've been following Lisa's, let's say, work in this particular area for a while. So I do have some sense that when we're in the meditation, I just had an appreciation. When I grew up in a Black neighborhood, and so I was a minority, and I just was feeling in the meditation an appreciation for that culture and all the things that I learned within that culture. And so that's how it impacted me. And then it's wonderful to hear everybody's takes and experiences regarding kind of our unconscious relationship with essentially the bodies that we're born into and the cultures that we're born into, and how that prevents us from seeing our privilege and that kind of thing. So to me, I just felt this deep appreciation of, there were some very difficult times growing up in my neighborhood. You know, there was lots of violence, and you know, can remember having a friend of mine who was Black in a group of 3 other kids, you know, attack me, and he was a friend. But it taught me that, you know, perpetration, and I know this is kind of the other way around a little bit, that the perpetration, you know, I knew he was a friend, but it really taught me to see how perpetration, when we're in groups, how we can get enveloped in wanting to belong to that group. And then that, and going along with the, you know, to be a member in that group, and then perpetration coming out like that. So that was because I knew he was really a friendly guy. It was just a strange thing. He didn't acknowledge that he knew me or anything. So that's where I went with the meditation. I just went into this appreciation of, I mean, that is kind of a grace with an ugly face. You just see and learn about things in life. And then what I appreciate about Lisa's work is, you know, it shows you, she's kind of pointing out, you know, how as we've been born into these bodies and the history of our ancestors and the suffering and the disconnection from where we came from, and just the ownership and attack kind of coming into a country that was not ours. It's just a perpetration coming from that angle. So it's really helpful to see. And I guess lastly, I think most important thing, I think, is for us to see this in our country and have a deep embodied understanding. So thanks, Catherine, for what you were saying. When we are blind to the history, we don't know how it's, let's say, affecting and driving us in our lives of, let's say, keeping our head in the sand and not wanting to know or even feel, you know, what's at the roots of this country. So anyway, that's what I'd like to share.
Thanks, John.
We have a few more minutes. Couple of other folks who have not shared yet, if you would like to, just how this is landing for you now, what matters to you. Again, no requirements.
I can share, kind of jumping with courage into a space that where I'm late to this particular conversation. What drew me to come is being deeply involved on an organizational level for the last decade in the work of dismantling white dominant ways of knowing, being, and doing from both the structure and the culture of the organization, and realizing that to authentically do that work at scale, individual people need to do the work of decolonizing themselves. And what's been so valuable to me walking through that journey, having systemic principles and system sensing skills, is helping people to, rather than, as soon as you talk about bias, right? unconscious bias is a slippery fish because it's unconscious. And so as soon as you name that, you can't touch it or see it or impact it. So instead, one of the ways that I try to work with people is saying, given what you just heard, what's happening in your body, given what we're witnessing right now in the dynamics, what's alive for you. And I have found that over time, by bringing that awareness, hopefully we have collectively started to level up the understanding of how to track the way that bias moves by knowing in our bodies, right, what's alive and what we need to be, that's calling our attention in, so that again, we can be continuing to decolonize ourselves and increase our capacity to navigate across difference in order to create a culture of belonging and liberation. So in any event, I have not yet read the book, and I look very much forward to, because certainly we see in systemic constellations all the time that somewhere in the lineage story is always resource.
Mm-hmm.
And that resource is often interrupted by the trauma either of leaving lands or by being part of harm that was done in order to take lands that were not ours. So I'm just grateful for this conversation, and I so regret being late and look forward to the recording. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. I note the time. So a couple of things we would want to do before we wrap up. But I want to give a chance if there's someone who needs to just like in 30 seconds has something that they didn't say, wouldn't want to close the door on you. Just want to make sure if there's somebody. Or a minute.
I just wanted to acknowledge that during the meditation, spiritual ancestor, when I was 17, I made a lifelong friend with Mary Merriweather, who was an African-American psychiatric nurse who, and she comes to mind because of the fact that our relationship spanned across a generation, and that there was a profound spiritual connection. And I see that the option for the possibility of healing in friendship and in relationships. I know that John's already left, but in some ways, my friendship with Mary was kind of has similarities to his relationship with his friend, and in Mary's case, she was over 50 when we met, and we had this lifelong friendship. And I found her presence very strong in this, and just to acknowledge the place of spiritual ancestors.
Yes.
And the power of healing that takes place through friendship and through individual encounters.
Yes. Thank you.
I love that reminder. We've been emphasizing this needs to be done in a group, but there's also kind of these one-on-one powerful encounters that are very important to these journeys as well. So thank you for that reminder. So at this point, John's trying to come back in. We'll bring him back in for the very end. Lisa, I have a couple of small logistical things at the end I want to connect with people about, but any last words, Lisa, before we sign off?
Thank you. Just a big thank you for being here. It's a blessing to be with all of you. And if you haven't particularly look at or listen to the writers, the essayists, the public conversations that we did the year of the book, there are links to the video conversations and also to many of the essayists also read excerpts from their essays on the Writers Radio platform. Those links are on the Eventbrite listing. So I encourage you to look, listen, take in those stories and let them be good medicine. Mhm. Mhm. And thanks again, Leslie, for convening us.
Thank you, Lisa. So a few last things I just want to share with the group before we go. One is, if you haven't bought the book, go buy the book. Hey, go buy the book. Give it as gifts for the holidays, you know? Share it around. If you're a Constellations facilitator, share it with your students, with your colleagues, in your networks. It's an important contribution to the conversation. I will include links for the book and for the podcast in the follow-up that I will send to all of you, including if you're like, I don't have time to hunt for that podcast link, I'll include it in that follow-up email for you. So before we leave, we've already lost a few people, but just for a moment, we've been together an hour and a half. Just come back to yourself and just notice what has unfolded over the last hour and a half. And allow an image or a question or an insight or an experience to come into your heart as your specific gift for this hour and a half for having been here. It's for you. Give yourself a moment to allow that to arise in you. And then when you have that, turn it into one short phrase or sentence. And then I invite you, if you would like to share, just unmute and share, no order. My ancestors are glad we're doing this.
It seemed important to have more of the lynching be seen.
If you would like to share yours, now's the time. All right, thank you very much. Lisa and I will be following up with you. We will be seeking to see if there's something that comes from this. So thank you very much for taking an hour and a half from all your really other good things you do to be here today. Feel free to unmute and have a messy goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Lisa, I really hear the Minnesota in you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gonna go have a little hot dish now, yeah.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be, oh.
Oh, maybe a little coffee, yeah.
Yeah,
And then
okay.
we'll sing Holy, Holy, Holy then, yeah.
Okay, then. See you next time.
Okay, let's go have
Okay.
a little jello. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Lisa and I are going to have a little chat here at the end. Amelia, thank you for coming.
Good to be with you, Amelia.
Thank you both. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There we go. And I will